I had exactly $23,847 in my savings account on a Tuesday morning. I know the exact number because I had checked it the night before, the way I always did before bed. A small, quiet ritual that made me feel like I was doing something right in a world where everything else felt uncertain. By Wednesday afternoon, there was $14.32 left. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat in my car in the hospital parking lot, still in my scrubs, and stared at my phone until the screen went dark. The name on the last transfer was my sister's. I need to back up, because if I just tell you what happened that Wednesday, you'd probably ask the same thing everyone asks. Why did you ever let her near your money in the first place? And that's a fair question. It's the question I've asked myself every single day since. But the answer isn't simple, and I think you deserve the real one. Not the cleaned up version, not the version where I sound like less of a fool. My name is Mara. I'm a pediatric nurse. I've worked the same hospital floor for 6 years, the kind of floor where the wins feel enormous and the losses follow you home. I share a small apartment with my 7-year-old son Eli, who has the biggest laugh of any person I've ever met, and a congenital heart condition that has required 2 surgeries already, with a third one coming. The third surgery was what the $23,847 was for. Not the whole cost. Insurance covers most of it, thank God. But the out-of-pocket portion, the recovery stay, the time I'd need off work without full pay, the follow-up appointments, the medication adjustments. I had been building that fund for 3 years. 3 years of picking up extra shifts, selling things I didn't need, eating lunch from home instead of the cafeteria. 3 years of watching that number climb and feeling, for the first time in a long time, like I was ahead of something instead of behind it. My sister Cassie is 4 years older than me. She is charming in the way that some people are charming. Effortlessly, instinctively, like it's something they breathe rather than do. Growing up, she was the one who could talk our parents into anything. She was the one who got the benefit of the doubt every single time. I loved her for it, honestly. I thought it was a gift. It took me until my late 20s to understand that charm is a tool, and tools can be used for anything. Cassie had been going through a rough stretch, or so she said. She'd lost her job at a marketing agency 8 months earlier, her boyfriend had left, and she was behind on rent. She called me in tears one evening while I was giving Eli his bath, and I listened the way I always did, the phone wedged between my ear and shoulder while I rinsed shampoo out of his hair. I just need a few months to get back on my feet, she said. I have a job interview next week. It looks really good, Mara. I just need to not get evicted before it happens. I told her I'd help with rent. 1 month. $1,100. She thanked me like I'd handed her a kidney. 2 weeks later, she called again. The job had fallen through. Could I help with her car insurance? Just this once. I said yes. Then it was groceries. Then it was a medical bill she said she couldn't prove was wrong, but that she was disputing. Then it was a loan she said she'd pay back by the end of the month. She never paid anything back. I want to be honest about something here, I knew. I didn't know the full scale of it, but I knew something was off. I could feel it the way you feel a storm before it arrives. That low pressure in the air, the way sounds carry differently. I kept giving anyway because she was my sister, and because somewhere in the back of my mind I believed that if I stopped, something worse would happen. That I would be the reason things fell apart for her. That I would have to carry that. That is what nobody tells you about enabling someone. It's not stupidity. It's fear wearing the costume of love. The account access was not something I gave her on purpose. I want to be very clear about that. 4 months before the Wednesday, everything disappeared. I had been in a car accident. Minor, nobody was hurt. But I was shaken and my car needed work. Cassie had driven me to the repair shop, waited with me, driven me home. In the chaos of managing everything that week, Eli's school pickup, my rescheduled shifts, the insurance calls, I had needed her to grab a cashier's check from my bank to pay the deductible. I had logged into my account on my phone to get the routing information and handed her the phone while I dug through the glove compartment for the paperwork. She had my phone for 4 minutes. 4 minutes was enough. I don't know exactly when she set up the access. I don't know if she'd been planning it for weeks, or if she saw the opportunity and took it in the moment. What I know is that the access existed, quietly, for 4 months, and I never knew to look. The day everything went wrong, she didn't take it all at once. That's the part that still turns my stomach. She was methodical about it. There were 6 transfers over a period of about 18 hours, each one just under the threshold that would trigger an automatic fraud alert from my bank. The amounts varied. $4,200, $30,800, $40,300, $3,600, $4,700, $2,100, $100. 6 transactions, $23,500. She left $14.32 because she knew a zero balance would trip an alert faster. She had thought about this. She had planned it. The last transfer cleared at 2:14 p.m. on a Wednesday. At 2:47 p.m., I checked my balance before transferring money to Eli's pediatric cardiology billing portal. I sat in that parking lot for 11 minutes. I know because I have a habit of checking the time when I feel like I might lose control of my breathing. It steadies me, gives me something concrete to hold on to. At 2:58 p.m., I called my bank. The woman on the phone was kind. She walked me through the transactions one by one. She confirmed the access had been added to the account 4 months ago. She flagged everything as disputed, froze the account, and escalated it to their fraud department within the same call. "You'll want to file a police report as well," she said. "I know," I said. "I'm going to." I did not call Cassie. I did not text her. I drove home, picked up Eli from the neighbor who watched him after school, made grilled cheese for dinner, read him 2 chapters of his book, and put him to bed. Then I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and I started building a case. This is the part that I think some people don't expect. I am not a forensic accountant or a lawyer or a detective. I'm a pediatric nurse. But I am someone who spent years handling complex patient files, insurance disputes, documentation requests. I know how to read records carefully. I know what a paper trail looks like and how to follow one. I had screenshots of every text where she'd asked me for money. I had the dates, the amounts, the reasons she'd given. I had my bank statements going back 14 months. I had the record of when the account access was added, cross-referenced with the date I'd handed her my phone at the repair shop. I had her name, her linked account number on the transfers, the timestamps. I also had something she didn't know about. 2 months earlier, I had started using a budgeting app that synced with my bank account. It logged every transaction automatically and kept a full audit trail, including the IP addresses and device IDs associated with account activity. I hadn't even looked at that section before. I opened it that night and I found everything. Every login, every transfer, device ID consistent across all 6 transactions, IP address registered to the apartment building where Cassie lived. I printed 43 pages of documentation. The next morning, I filed a police report. The detective I spoke with, a woman named Patterson, who had the manner of someone who has heard everything and is surprised by nothing, reviewed what I brought and told me this was enough to pursue criminal charges for wire fraud and theft. "Has she contacted you?" Detective Patterson asked. "No," I said. "She will," she said. She was right. Cassie called me at 6:22 p.m. that Thursday, one day and roughly 4 hours after the last transfer cleared. I didn't answer. She called again. And again. Then she texted, "Mara, please pick up. I know you saw it. Please just let me explain." I didn't respond. She called from a different number 20 minutes later. I picked up that one because I didn't recognize it and I thought it might be the hospital. The moment she realized I'd answered, something shifted in her voice. It went from the version of Cassie I knew, the soft one, the persuasive one, to something I had never heard from her before. "You already called the bank, didn't you?" she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said. "Mara." Her voice cracked, but not with guilt. With panic. "Do you understand what you just did? Do you understand what's going to happen to me?" I said nothing. I needed that money. I was going to pay it back. I have a plan. I just needed time. You didn't even give me a chance to explain. You called the bank. You probably called the police. And now my life is over because you couldn't just— She stopped. "Then, that money wasn't even yours yet. You were saving it. You still had time. Eli's surgery isn't for months. I want to tell you that I stayed calm because I was strong. The truth is, I stayed calm because I had gone somewhere inside myself that was past the point where her words could reach me. Something had closed over, quietly, the way a wound closes. "The surgery is in 11 weeks, I said. "He's 7 years old, Cassie." She started crying then. Real tears. I could hear them, the specific irregularity of real crying versus performed crying. But I had learned, somewhere in those 11 minutes in the parking lot, that tears from someone who planned 6 separate transfers over 18 hours to stay under the fraud threshold are not the same as tears from grief. They are tears from consequences. "I'm sorry," she said. "I am so sorry. I'll fix it. I'll get the money back. Just please call the bank back. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Please, Mara." "I'm not going to do that," I said. The crying stopped. "You're really going to do this to your own sister?" "You took Eli's surgery fund," I said. "You took 3 years of my life. I haven't done anything to you." She hung up. She called back 4 more times that night. I let them all go to voicemail. At some point around midnight, I turned my phone face down and went to sleep, because Eli had an early cardiology appointment, and I needed to be present for it. What I didn't know that night, what I found out 2 days later, was that the moment my bank flagged the transfers as disputed wire fraud and shared the report with the relevant authorities, a process had started that Cassie had absolutely no way to stop. Her linked account had been frozen pending investigation. The money had not been moved out of that account yet. She had been, based on what the detective told me later, intending to transfer it again to a third account and then withdraw it in cash. But the fraud flag had hit before she could complete that step. Every dollar was still there. I found that out on Friday morning when Detective Patterson called me. "We've located the full amount," she said. "The funds are frozen. We'll begin the process of returning them to your account once the case is formally opened, which should be within the next few business days." I sat down on the floor of my kitchen. Just slid right down the cabinet and sat there. Eli came in from the living room in his pajamas, holding his dinosaur, a worn green stegosaurus he's had since he was 3, and looked at me sitting on the floor with an expression of very serious concern. "Mama? Did something happen?" I looked at him. This kid who has had 2 open-heart surgeries. This kid who asked the anesthesiologist before his last procedure if he would remember any dreams. This kid who had no idea that someone had tried to take away the thing we'd been building together, one extra shift at a time. "Something good," I said. "Something really good happened." He sat down on the floor next to me, pressed his shoulder against mine, and went back to looking at his dinosaur. Cassie was formally charged 6 weeks later. The case moved faster than I expected. The documentation I brought in, combined with the bank's own fraud records and the IP trail from the budgeting app, made it straightforward. Her attorney contacted me twice through a third party to ask if I would consider dropping charges in exchange for a repayment agreement. Both times I said no, not out of cruelty, out of the very simple understanding that someone who spent 4 months quietly building access to my account and 18 hours carefully structuring transfers to avoid detection is not someone who will honor a repayment agreement. The money came back to my account 22 days after it disappeared. I transferred it immediately to a new account, one that only I have ever touched and only I will ever touch, and I watched the balance sit there, whole and unbroken. I booked Eli's surgery 2 weeks later. I want to say something here to anyone who is reading this and recognizing themselves in the parts I skipped over. The years of small requests, the guilt, the telling yourself it was love when really it was fear. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I don't know your situation, but I'll tell you this. The moment I stopped trying to cushion Cassie from consequences, I found out that I was capable of things I hadn't known. I was capable of. That 43 pages of documentation didn't come from anger. It came from clarity, and clarity, I've learned, is what happens when you stop carrying someone else's weight as though it were your own. Eli's surgery is scheduled for next month. His cardiologist says the procedure has a very high success rate and that his recovery should go smoothly. She says kids his age bounce back faster than anyone expects. She says with a real smile that he is going to be fine. I believe her. I also believe that I am going to be fine, that we are going to be fine, me and my son and the life I have been building, quietly, on extra shifts and packed lunches, and the very stubborn conviction that we deserve something solid underneath us. I have not spoken to Cassie since the night she asked me to call the bank and pretend it was a misunderstanding. I don't know what her day-to-day looks like now, and I have made peace with not knowing. Some doors, when you finally let them close, turn out to have been drafty for years. You don't notice how cold it was until the warmth comes back. The last thing I'll say is this. A few weeks ago, Eli and I were driving home from his pre-op appointment, and he was asking me all his usual questions. Why do they take blood? Does the machine that checks your heartbeat feel anything? Will the hospital have good jello this time? And then out of nowhere, in the way that kids do, he pivoted completely. "Mama," he said, "are we going to be okay?" I looked at him in the rearview mirror. 7 years old, big brown eyes, wearing his dinosaur shirt with a small hole in the collar that he refuses to let me throw away. "Yeah, baby," I said. "We're going to be really okay." He nodded, satisfied, and went back to looking out the window at the trees. And I meant it. For the first time in a long time, I completely meant it. I've thought a lot about what I would have done differently. Not in the way people mean when they're punishing themselves. I'm past that, but genuinely, honestly, trying to understand the mechanics of how I got there. How a person who manages complex medical files and insurance disputes for a living somehow couldn't see what was happening in her own bank account. And what I keep coming back to is this. I saw it. I just chose not to look directly at it. There's a difference between blindness and avoidance. And for years I was doing the second thing while telling myself it was the first. Cassie didn't steal from me because she was smarter than me, or because I was careless. She stole from me because I had made it safe to. Every time she asked and I said yes. Every time a boundary I'd quietly set in my own head dissolved the moment she cried. Every time I transferred money I couldn't afford to lose because the alternative felt worse. I was teaching her something. I was teaching her that there were no real consequences for taking from me, that my no was always negotiable, that my needs would always yield to hers. That's not something I say to blame myself for what she did. What she did was her choice, fully and deliberately. 6 transfers, structured carefully to stay under the fraud threshold. That's not an impulse. That's a decision made over time by someone who understood exactly what they were doing. The responsibility for that sits entirely with her. But the years before it? The patterns I kept feeding? That part was mine to own. Here's what I understand now that I didn't then. Boundaries aren't walls you build against people you don't love. They're the proof that you take the relationship seriously enough to tell the truth about it. Every time I gave Cassie money I didn't have, I wasn't being generous. I was being dishonest, with her and with myself. I was pretending things were fine when they weren't. I was funding a version of our relationship that only existed in my head. The clarity I felt sitting at that kitchen table with my laptop, building a case against my own sister. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. It hurt in a way I don't have precise words for. But underneath the hurt, there was something else. Something I hadn't felt in years. I was doing the honest thing, the hard thing. And those two things I've learned are almost always the same thing. Eli doesn't know the full story. He's 7, and what he knows is that his surgery is scheduled, that his mama is okay, and that sometimes things get scary, but you figure it out. That's enough for now. What I hope he carries with him, not from anything I've told him, but from watching how I move through this, is that being taken advantage of doesn't have to be the end of the story. That you can be hurt and still be clear. That documentation and a steady voice can accomplish things that anger never could. There's a version of this story where I called Cassie screaming, where I spent weeks paralyzed, where I let the fear of what pressing charges would mean for our family stop me from doing what I knew was right. I almost lived that version. What pulled me out of it was Eli sitting on the floor next to me, shoulder to shoulder, not asking for anything, just being there. He didn't know he did it, but that kid has pulled me out of more dark rooms than he'll ever know, just by existing, just by needing me to keep going. I kept going. I built the case, I made the calls, and in the end, every dollar came back. Not because the universe rewarded me, not because I deserved it more than someone else would have, but because I did the methodical, unsexy, unglamorous work of following the paper trail and letting the process do what it was designed to do. Actions have outcomes, decisions compound. The 6 transfers Cassie made were decisions that compounded in one direction. The 43 pages I printed were decisions that compounded in another. That's the whole lesson, honestly. It's not complicated. It's just hard.